Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. We'll get started now if we can. And I'm delighted to have the first of our alumni panel, and this one's specifically dedicated to those working in television. And I love having the job of speaking to the alumni panel because obviously I taught most of you, and so it's really nice to have you back as guests when only a very short time ago, for some of you, you were sitting in the front row doing the same thing that you guys are doing now. So we will start off, I'll do quick introductions. So Beth Turner is to my right, and Beth is a broadcast journalist and planning producer at BBC Breakfast, and actually still student because you haven't actually graduated. So she is doing this in her spare, no, she's doing this full time now, but has the awesome job that has started in the summer. That's right, isn't it? Beside her is Grace McGrory, and Grace graduated 2 years ago, and she is now the BBC East Yorkshire multi-platform journalist. Beside her is her colleague from the same class year, 2 years ago, Charlie Bergman, production journalist at ITV Calendar, basically news editor, basically producer. She does everything. And beside her is Mike Rossiter, and I've got to get the title right because it's quite long. Senior Associate Director, Sky Sports Football. Have I got that right? Okay. And so welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for your time. We're going to go through a little bit of background. So I'm going to start with you, Beth, because you're the sort of newest of our graduates, but also have this awesome job at BBC Breakfast. How in the world did you get that?
I always say it's mostly luck, to be honest. No, when I was studying, I started freelancing at Radio 5 Live. Over in Manchester, and I was doing that from January until June, and I saw a job being advertised as a producer for Breakfast TV, and I thought, you know what, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I didn't even get an interview, nothing, but the editor pulled me to one side, took me out for coffee and offered me a 3-month freelancing job. So I took it, jumped at it, left the safety of 5 Live, and then from that I was taken on permanent.
So what do you think it was about your CV that somebody, well, first of all, do they obviously read them, but obviously, what do you think it was that he saw in your CV that made him think, this is the woman for us?
Well, I can't say for what he thought, but I think it's definitely because I worked at 5 Live. He did say that to me because I had the experience in radio, but also I had a very successful career before I came back here to do my masters. I was an accountant, so that gave me life skills that I could bring into the industry that other people didn't necessarily have.
Yeah, awesome. And I know that you balanced being an MA student with going and doing all those shifts over at BBC Radio. So was that a difficult balance? Did you see you obviously saw a reason for doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely tricky at the time because I was here most of the days of the week doing my MA. Every weekend I was working at 5 Live, 10 p.m. till 1 a.m. on the late show. And then in summer, in June, I started full-time, 5 days a week on Breakfast whilst doing my dissertation, and all the while being a mum.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, awesome. We'll get back to that in a minute. But Grace, I'll turn to you now because you've only really just recently started in television in East Yorkshire. Can you tell us what happened in the journey from a graduate to that?
Yeah, I've been really lucky because I've had some really good jobs. So I graduated here, was it May 2020? We finished the course in May 2022, around about that time. And I straight away got a job at BBC Radio Lincolnshire. So I actually started in local radio, which was amazing. I was the breakfast reporter mainly. So I'd wake up at 4:30 every morning and I'd drive to Lincoln, but it was tiring, but I absolutely loved it. I learned so much and I got such great experience, like sent on stories that I wouldn't even have been able to anywhere else, basically. So I really liked that, but then I was never really on a permanent contract there. A lot of it is like fixed term contracts. So it was coming to an end and I was kind of thinking, oh, I think I'm ready to go into telly. I'm just going to try. So I then got a job at Look North in Leeds. So I was there for a year. So it was really nice to come back to Leeds because obviously I'd been at uni here, so that was really nice. Loved it, got loads of producing experience, which is really different to reporting. But I'm so glad I got that because it's made me so much more well-rounded. And then, I've gone back to Hull now because I really like the patch, I really like the area. The job came up and hopefully, I'll be able to learn even more. So, that's kind of how it all happened. I've had a lot of jobs in 2 years. I've been busy, I know.
Well, Charlie, similar, because you didn't start in television. You had a job first at NewsQuest. And I remember having a little discussion with you about that. But tell us about why you made the transition and how soon it was after graduation.
So I was kind of similar to Grace. Like, we'd finished all our exams, but we still had our dissertation when I got the job at NewsQuest, which I really ummed and ahed about because I knew I wanted to work in TV. I didn't really want to work in newspapers. But the job came up, and that was sort of where my strengths were. Like, I was always, throughout the Masters, I was always best at writing more than probably I was at broadcast. And I just thought, look, it's not what I want to do forever, but I'll just go for it and see. And I would really recommend that because I probably never would have got the job at ITV had I not had that on my CV before. And I learnt loads of really good skills, and I got to report on a lot of great stories for the paper. But I was only there for a few months, probably like 3 months, I think. And then a job came up at ITV, Calendar in Yorkshire, so I moved back up to Leeds and started there. And I came in as a production journalist, which is basically, you do a bit of everything. You plan stories, you produce bulletins, like lates and earlies, you assist with the programme, but then about a year and a bit ago I started news editing, and now I've started producing the main 6 o'clock programme, which is kind of the route I want to go down, rather than reporting. I've done quite a lot within ITV, but that's where I've spent the most of my time since graduating.
Okay, and Mike, you graduated even longer. Remind me when you graduated.
2008.
And you, among the panel here, you did your undergrad as well as your master's here.
Yes,
post-grad,
correct.
Post-grad. So tell us your journey, because I think you started off co-hosting with the famous Darren Harper.
Yeah, the morning breakfast show on the now defunct Yorkshire Radio. Always annoyed me that Darren's name came first as well. Darren and Mike, it was just like, it should have been the other way around. But so I actually went to Yorkshire Radio on placement from here, then got a full-time job there. But I always wanted to work in TV. That was always my, without sounding that, passion. And I wanted to be a reporter. That's what I wanted to be. So I left Yorkshire Radio to go freelance, made contacts with Sky Sports, and then very quickly realised that I was an awful TV reporter. Like, the camera went live, and I just went wooden. I just was like, no, I can't. Like, it just wasn't natural. But I thought, keep going. So a job came up in London, which I took. I thought I'd move down for 6 months, be a reporter, and then move back here. And I've been down there 10 years. I first joined cricket, worked there for 5 years. And then, 5 years ago, I moved over to the football department where, as you now say, I'm now a senior associate director.
You need to get to whatever stage where it's less words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and so for a lot of our students, they think of, being in television news or television sports reporting or television sport commentating. They just think of the person that they see on television, or the person behind the microphone, or the person behind the news desk. But I think, more so than any other of the platforms, there's a lot of jobs that aren't the person holding the microphone. So tell us a little bit about what senior associate directing.
Do you know, you're spot on, because the amount of people who join, commentator-wise, who literally think it's, 2 people with a microphone, and that's it. Like, I think it only last year, Gary Neville walked into the TV truck and went, "What goes on in here then?" And he's worked at Sky for like 10 years. So yeah, my role is, without sort of sounding too basic, is to direct what you see. If you're watching a football game, I would work with anywhere between sort of 10 and 26 cameras, and it's your job to kind of direct what shots they see. But then there's a sound team, there's a whole AP team who are responsible for the replays, there's vision, there's so many called like riggers who are there. They travel up and down the country in these trucks, just rigging all the cables to make sure that that a game can go to air. So
I guess the message for camera-shy people is there still can be a role for you.
Oh, absolutely. When I first wanted to be a reporter, I didn't have a clue what an assistant producer was, which I first joined Sky as. But that would be my thing. Like, there's always a role. If I knew I wanted to work in TV, and even though I wasn't good enough or comfortable enough to be a reporter, there's so many different roles. You know, some people go and they actually find they love being a camera op. You know, they might want to be a reporter and they go, "Oh, actually, I find this side of it interesting." And for me, I absolutely love what I do, the directing side. When the show goes live and you're in charge of what's going out, for me, there's kind of no greater feeling.
And Charlie, even though you did fantastic sort of live reporting while you were a student here, you really fit naturally in the producer role. What do you think it is about that?
I think there's different skill sets. And to be honest, trying everything out is the best way to figure out what you're going to like. I knew I never wanted to be a reporter. I think there's something really cool about being able to say to your mum, "I'm on the telly tonight," and it feels great. But for me, I just knew it's not what I wanted to do day in, day out. Like, I'd done it once, tick that box, and I will happily never do it again. But there's something for me, like the adrenaline of producing a programme and being sat in the gallery, and you know that full half hour it's like your baby and you've done it all. And, you know, I think there's probably that with reporting as well, like it's your story, but there's something about producing when the full programme is yours and you've come up with everything and you are kind of in charge of everybody, which is, like, you have to be a certain type of personality, but I really enjoy that. I like having my vision and telling people this is what I want from you. And I feel like you get like a real rush out of it when your programme's on air. Can
I just, on that as well, because obviously in TV there's director or producer. I could not be a producer because you have to do so much prep, particularly in sport. Well, not particularly in sport, but from my point of view, what I see from the producers in sport, there's all the planning in the days beforehand. You have to look at all the VTs that are being built. You have to change them. You have to liaise with the guests. You have to come up with a narrative of the show. As a director, I walk in, somebody gives me a running order and I just make sure it happens. Then afterwards I can just leave. And but producers have to deal with fallouts, any particular stories that have happened. So even though you work really closely with a producer or a director, it's a very different mindset and a very different sort of outlook. So I could never be a producer because I'm not organised enough, but I know producers who couldn't be a director speaking to the whole OB and being in control of what goes on. So it is even though you work very closely together, it's 2 very different jobs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you don't work in it, you sort of think, so I always thought producing was just you put the programme together, you plan the stories. But I would say actually at least 50% of the job is managing personalities. And from when I get in at 7:30 till after the programme's come off air, most of the day is speaking to reporters and camera crews and like speaking to my director and making sure everyone's happy and they understand what's going on and dealing with people who might be difficult personalities, and that is a huge part of the job. And I think when I went into it as, you know, obviously like a young woman, quite newly graduated, that was the thing that I found hardest, is these people that had been reporting for like 20 years. How do I kind of tell them, no, I don't want you doing it like that? But you kind of have to put that imposter syndrome to the side and just do it, and actually people will respect you more for that, I think.
So Grace, on the other side of the coin.
Maybe I'm one of those people.
You obviously Is your mum happy when you call up and say, Mama,
Yeah.
I'm telling tonight?
My mum loves it. She loved radio. She'd wake up to the sound of my voice. I mean, what more could you want? Yeah, she likes it. But it is interesting having done a bit of both, because I obviously started reporting and then I was always produced by somebody else. So they'd tell me where to go, what they wanted from me. Whereas then at Look North in Leeds, I was basically what's called an item producer. So you're meant to be like assigned to a certain story, but you just ended up really helping the producer with whatever they wanted. And it's really interesting, as Charlie says, seeing the different sides. And they do go hand in hand, they do definitely overlap. But I think it's so worthwhile getting experience in both of them, because then when you're producing, you understand what the reporter's feeling when they're outside in the rain and it's really cold, and you get that. But then when you report, you're like, well, the producer needs something because they need something to fill the bulletin. So it's like you see both sides of it, really, which I think is so valuable. It's made me more well-rounded having done both. Yeah.
And Beth, because I also saw the producer side of you when you were a student here, and I'm just wondering, is that your calling, do you think, or is there's something else that you're itching to do?
No, I'm really happy being a producer. I absolutely love it. And I have to echo what you said, like seeing your vision from your head go out live on TV is just an incredible feeling. And I'm definitely one of the people that needs to be in control of what's happening. So I don't think I could be on the other end and be a reporter and someone telling me what to do. I'd much rather be the one that's saying, this is what I want from you and please go out and do this.
So can you tell us maybe one of the recent stories that you've been working on and how that all came together?
Yes, so one of the stories that I worked on, we had two brothers on air called the FTD brothers, and their mother and their grandmother had died from dementia. And they got tested and it turned out they had the gene, which meant they were going to also get dementia in the 40s and die in their 50s. But these brothers were incredible and they were doing all of these challenges to raise money for Alzheimer's. And I got them on the sofa and they told me they were going to do a challenge where they were going to run the length of the UK in a month. So I pitched it to our editors and said, we really have to follow this. And we did it. We followed the whole challenge from the top of Scotland to the bottom of the country. And by having them on BBC Breakfast and News at 1, we more than doubled their charity intake and they got thousands from it.
Excellent. Well done. Well done. So a lot of the stories that you cover on BBC Breakfast are not maybe the sort of hard news investigative stories, because you do a lot of stories that highlight trauma and people's struggles. Do you see that as the sort of style of the show, or?
It's what we call a magazine show. So we have features, which is a lot of what my team work on the planning team, where there's more longevity with it and we follow the stories from beginning to end. We do breaking news as well. We have something called a news belt, which is the first 15 minutes and last 15 minutes of every hour, we will do all the breaking news. But most of it is made up from features, whether that's, the personal tragedies or public notices. Like recently worked on a story highlighting the dangers of Halloween costumes and the dangers of hot water bottles. And we have a lot of celebrity guests. My team deal with that as well. So it is a magazine show and there's light and shade to all of it.
Excellent. And Grace, can you take us to one of the stories that you covered that you're particularly proud of?
It's so hard to pick anything out, because when I was doing local radio, for me I felt proud of a lot of the stuff that I did, because I kind of, Charlie was talking about it as well, kind of imposter syndrome, being sent to stories where, I don't know, Prince William, to me that was crazy. I got sent to an RAF base and Prince William was there and I was like, this is crazy. I'd been graduated 6 months. But I feel like one of the ones I was most proud of, and I use this example even though it's not a huge story, it's not something earth-shattering, but I was sent to, I thought the same thing, but I was sent to it's going to be a nuclear fusion site in Lincolnshire. And I was really worried about the story because I knew nothing about it, literally nothing. Like, I'm light and fluffy story kind of girl. Like, I like the happiness and the nice people and the stories. And I was really worried because I didn't know anything about it. And I feel like the word nuclear sounds really scary and really sciencey. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was meeting all these like government officials to speak to them live into the breakfast show. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I have no idea. So I thought, if I don't understand it, the audience aren't going to understand it because your average person doesn't understand about nuclear fusion either. So I did a bit of research about it before I went, but I thought, I'm just going to own it. I'm just going to own the fact that I don't know anything about it and turn that into something. And I was having to do hits for... I was still quite new, and I had to do hits for Radio Lincolnshire, Radio Sheffield, and Radio Nottingham, all within about 2 hours. I think I did about 13 lives, something like that. It was ridiculous. Like, it was crazy. But I just trusted myself, and I trusted my approach to it, and it ended up, doing really well. So I always use that example because I always think when you are reporting, you have no idea what you're going to get sent to. And a lot of the time, it maybe isn't what your comfort zone is and what you'd like to do. And like I did so much other stuff, but I always come back to that example because I'm like, I really just trusted myself and, my approach, and it paid off. Like, no one expects you to know inside out every topic. I always say I'm a bit like a whirlwind. If I ever go anywhere, I go and it's just chaos, and then I just leave. And it's like the next day's a different story. So, you become an expert in a lot of different things, but not like a deep dive expert. So I always use that example because I feel like I learned a lot from it, just to trust myself. Like, you will do it. Just be yourself and trust yourself. Yeah.
Charlie, the same question, but it's slightly different because it's probably a program that you're most proud about or an approach that the team took, that you led.
Yeah, I mean, where Grace says she loves light and fluffy, without sounding like I'm a weird psycho, I like doing the kind of harder news, kind of darker stories. So, like, some of the things I've been most proud of, the reason I wanted to be a journalist, without sounding kind of cliche, is that I wanted to tell people stories and I wanted to kind of help people, and that is the sort of things I'm most proud of. Like, I got us an interview that was an exclusive with the parents of a woman who'd been murdered by her husband, and they hadn't spoken to anybody before and they never wanted to, but I kind of got to know them really well and they trusted me, and we ended up doing quite a lot with them and then doing a documentary with them. So I was really, really proud of that, and we helped them kind of campaign for his sentence to be extended. So you actually feel like you've achieved something and you've helped people. And I think day to day, when I'm producing, if I'm producing a programme, I've done one programme that was a special, which was when XL bullies were kind of banned. I did like a special programme on that, which was great because I got to plan it for months, and then to see all of your hard work go out is amazing. But generally, when you're doing a programme, it's not like that. Like, it is just lots of different things, and you have to have light and shade, and it's not necessarily a particular story that you're most proud of. It's sort of just being able to fill the half an hour and it flows and it worked, and you've got the hard breaking news that you've responded to. And no offence, there's something great about when there's something breaks last minute, especially like when you're news editing and you manage to get it on the programme, and then you turn on Look North and they've not got it, and you're like, you feel so satisfied. And then having like the happy ending at the bottom of the programme, like, I think that is, it's not necessarily a particular story, it's just, it's kind of the overview of the whole story. But in terms of particular stories, it's things like with that woman that died, like, I think afterwards you do just feel like I've actually made an impact. And I think probably more so for reporters, but for everybody, like, we're doing this day in, day out, so you kind of forget. But for somebody who, they have a TV crew come to their house and film with them, they're going to remember that forever, and they're going to talk about that for years and years, like when ITV came and filmed at my house and I was on the telly. And I think sometimes you forget about that, and you kind of have to remind yourself, like, you are really making a massive impact on these people's lives, which I feel really proud of.
And just for a lot of our students, of course, are not watching television news in the way that we grew up with, some of us grew up with. Can you give them a reason to watch a television news program, an appointment to view program?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it is changing a lot. So I know at ITV, like, we've got a massive focus now on ITVX, which is like our news streaming service, and we've got news on that, and we're putting a lot of resource into kind of doing exclusive things that are kind of bespoke specifically for ITVX, because clearly that is the direction that everything's moving towards. But I think, like, there is something still so brilliant about watching a regional news programme and there's just such a mix, like, it's proper community stories, and you get all of the breaking news and, like, the main headlines that you need to know, but you also, like, learn so much about communities and people that you probably never would hear about otherwise. And I think, like, even though I work in TV, I do get a lot of my news from, like, Twitter and stuff like that. But you don't get that same kind of really understanding people just by, like, reading a news article or scrolling through social media as you do actually watching the programme. But I would say, it's a bit of a tangent, that now if you are applying to work in TV news, at least for us, like, digital and that side of things is the most important thing. And, like, in interviews, they will always ask you about digital, about the website, about like, streaming services, social media, because everything we're doing now, we're also doing, kind of thinking about that in mind as well.
And Mike, it's not quite the same.
I was going to say, I feel a bit like an imposter here. Hard-hitting news stories. I watch football for a living, so good luck following that.
Was there a particularly challenging? Is there something that, you know, it went a bit nuts? There
was. I don't know if people follow football or not, but last year there was a player for Luton, Tom Lockyer, who had a heart attack on the pitch, and I was doing that game, and it's sort of, you almost go into, like, autopilot when something like that happens, because you can't train for that. You don't train for somebody to be dying on the pitch, you know, and how to cover it. But I remember in one of the European Championships, another player, Christian Eriksen, collapsed for Denmark. And the way that was directed was appalling. Like, they showed him being defibrillated, however you say it, on the pitch. You saw them shocking his body. They cut to his wife, who was on the sideline crying, and it just didn't sit well. So it's little things like that I almost had a flashback to seeing how I felt watching that when Tom Lockyer died, and I was proud of myself for just treating it with a little bit of respect and dignity, and, you know, and that's where, as a director, you really sort of come into your own, because you have to direct. When the game's happening, the camera follows the ball. It's fairly straightforward. But with that, it was like actually getting the cameras to show certain shots that I wanted, and treating it with a little bit of respect. And if somebody was visibly upset in the crowd, don't show that, because, you know, it's not a drama series. This is actually somebody's life that literally could be ending on the pitch. So I think that, from someone who just wanted to direct football, I think that was something that I'll always remember, and something that I would take a lot from.
Yeah, and probably the officials had that sort of knowledge as well this second time around too, because I think they had the screens up.
Yeah, and so I can't, obviously it was like a world feed, but even I thought, apologies if anyone works for the BBC, but the way that was shown, because they could have come away from it and they stayed on it. And I think even the director the BBC director got a lot of criticism for it, and they said they would do things differently. And look, like I say, they've not done anything intentionally. Even the world feed director who's doing the game, they've just not thought. And it's easy for me to say, sitting here now in my, you know, ivory tower, that, oh, the way I handled it was so much better than he. But the way I handled it was because I'd seen it before, and I learned from what somebody else had done, in my opinion, wrong. And I'm sure that person, whenever, hopefully it never does, but if anything like that happens again, they will cover it in a lot different way.
We're going to open it up to questions in just a second, but I want to just do a quick fire, very quick answer, because we want to give our students a reason to come to class, to learn from us. So is there anything at all that you might have learned from your lovely lecturers who try so hard for you, that you've taken with you into your careers and you remember, actually that was something that's been really helpful?
I probably have a couple of stuff. So I think the main thing I took from TV Newsweek was the person is always the story. It's very easy to get an official, but the case study is always the story, and that's who you need to focus on. And actually, law with Lee, something came up recently when we were covering some train court cases, and because I was the most recent one who'd gone through my law training, I was the only one who knew about the single justice procedure. So I was kind of like the little expert in the team because of Lee.
I think for me, working in TV is how important, like Charlie said, digital is now. But Mojo, I know you'll love this. I didn't just say that, I'm being honestly. How important Mojo is, how important you being able to not only understand the editorial side, but also the technical side, because that is the direction. More and more people are going out and filming their own stories on mobile phones. Literally, it does happen. Like, it's not just a lie. Like, it is real. And so I think everything you said, even from like white balance, understanding that and just understanding sequences and just all the stuff that we learn, it's so important because you're not always going to have a camera crew with you. It's just not going to happen. So I think for me, that was one of the most valuable things, among everything else, is just for the future how important it is to be able to do it yourself. And it's great when you can as well.
I might cry. Charlie, same question to you.
I think everything, like, genuinely, like, we loved
Yeah,
this
we
course.
loved it.
And I think the TV news days, particularly because obviously you and Lindsay worked at ITV, like, they are pretty spot on to what my day-to-day work is like. But the number one thing is law. Like, I use my law knowledge every single day, and particularly as a news editor, I have to speak to the ITV's lawyers and liaise with them. And obviously you take their advice, they're lawyers, but sometimes you do actually need to push back a bit because obviously they're always erring on the side of caution. We're wanting to get the best story out, and to have that legal knowledge to be able to say, actually no, I think I can do this, is like so valuable. Like, every single day I use what I learned here from law.
Mike, it's a bit further back for you, but is there anything?
My lecturer on the postgrad actually said one phrase to me that I stood like, never give up and never burn bridges, because you will, so I feel like I need a violin here, but you will get knockbacks in your career, like, and as you know, I was devastated when I realised I wasn't good enough to be a reporter, but now I couldn't think of anything worse, and I love what I do. And also, never burn bridges, because you never know who you're going to, even if, you know, mine and Darren's old boss, he didn't like me. I had no idea, like, whether it's clash of personalities, he just did not like me. And he used to just single me out for stuff. That's true, Darren, isn't it? Like
100% true.
I even got disciplined because my car got stuck in the snow. Do you know what I mean? It was just stuff like that. But you just sort of take it on board, take it on the chin, and then it turned out that a few years later, I actually needed something from him in a part of something I was doing for Sky. So it would have been so easy for me just to fall out with him and just say, right, I've got nothing to put. Just never burn bridges, because you never know. Somebody that you go, oh, I'm never going to work with them again. You might well need them for something in the future.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good life lesson as well.
To echo
100%.
that, genuinely, it sounds cliche, but like, the most important thing for getting jobs is to be nice and
Friendly, yeah.
have a bit of a laugh. Like, nobody wants to work with someone who's so serious and unfriendly.
It's a stressful job, is it? It's a stressful job, and if you've got somebody who's just like, as a director, you're speaking to 100 and so many people on a game. If you're just, there's directors at Sky who shout, and it's not fun. No. Like, you're there, it's a stressful job anyway, and if you've got somebody just shouting at you unnecessarily the entire time, then it's not fun to go to work.
I've definitely had more opportunities and progressed more quickly, like, because I get on with people, and you can't underestimate that. Like, that is such a massive thing, because at the end of the day, the people who are hiring you are also going to have to speak to you every single day in the office. So they don't want someone who's going to be a not nice person.
It is. It's a really professional industry. Don't be afraid of that. Don't let that intimidate you. Just be yourself, because they will be grateful that you are like that. Because at the end of the day, I mean, speaking from being on the radio and stuff like that, you need to have that personality because it's organic. And I think it's about how you are as a person to work with as well. Not everything, like you were saying, there's a massive team behind a reporter or a presenter who's on screen. And it's like any other workplace, like you have to be able to get on with them. You just be a nice person, that's what I'd say.
Catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So, okay, some questions then, Darren.
Okay. Oh, right. Also, Mike, you've got to remember you put the wrong fuel in the radio car on the way to an away game.
No.
Just saying.
That is not true. But
Hi, thanks everyone. My question's for you, Beth. So what inspired you to pivot your career, and how did you find juggling being a mum and going into a new industry?
So what actually inspired me was my daughter. I was on maternity leave and I was in a car with my husband, and he said, if you could do anything differently, what would you do? I said, oh, I'd go to uni. I wish I'd have gone to uni. And he was like, right, quit your job, don't go back, go to uni. And I did, convinced to be a history teacher, actually. So I went and I did history and media, and I taught while I was doing that as a supply teacher. And I thought, this isn't really for me. And for my dissertation, I made a podcast, and I just connected instantly with interviewing people and being creative and making the podcast. And I thought, this is what I need to do. So I sought out my own mentor from the BBC, Tony Phillips, and he helped me with my podcast. And I knew I had my sights set on the BBC, that's who I'm going to work for. And I found a scholarship to be able to do my master's, because obviously, as you know, only my husband was working. We had a daughter. I needed help funding it. So I found a scholarship with the NCTJ, and through them got connections with the BBC, and finally got the dream of working with them.
Hi. Oh, God. So my question is about, this is really weird, the echo. My question's about energy levels, and like you were talking about bringing your vision to life, you know, and I know that the more effort that you put into a story, the more it's going to, you're going to be prouder of it and it's going to be better, but the more you're going to be drained. So I'm just wondering about like keeping your energy levels up, and I know there's a big problem with burnout in the industry, so how do you maintain like self-care?
Well, I would say, like, obviously everyone's dream is to have those amazing stories where you make a massive difference and you're making an impact and you're working on it for ages, and that is amazing. I'm not underestimating that, but that is not sustainable to do every single day. It's just not realistic. And I think, like, for me, I had a run where I was working on loads of really, really grim court cases, and then I was producing the weekend when all the riots happened. And I just afterwards, I got in my car and I just cried. And I'm usually quite thick-skinned, and this kind of thing doesn't bother me, but I think you do need to sometimes just be like, I actually cannot keep going, covering all these grim stories. Sometimes you have to just be like, do you know what, I don't want to do that today, I want to do something a bit nicer, or I want to do something that I don't have to think about too much. And I think it's really important to get that balance. And for me, like, I will put 1,000,000% in when I'm at work, and I will be really kind of let myself get really stressed and really busy. But then when I leave the office, that is it. And that is a good thing about news, is that you pretty much never have to think about that day again or that story again. And I won't think about it. I never, ever go home and carry on checking my emails or thinking back over, oh, I should have done that differently with that programme. I just don't think about it again, because otherwise I think you just drive yourself insane.
I think because of the nature, I don't know if it's about, obviously I do a little bit of planning, but a lot of what I do, the deadline is 7 p.m. So the deadline for that day, so you go in at 9, they'll tell you what stories you're working on today, you'll help put the programme together, and then at 7, it's done. There's new news, like yesterday's news. So I think that does help with me, because I'll be like, oh, it's kind of finished now. You can kind of put that story to bed, because if you dwell on it, you won't be able to go on to the next one. I used to do lives on radio, and I used to think, oh, that wasn't great. Like, I didn't like it. But you just can't dwell on it because you don't have time. And I think that's the first introduction that I had, because when you're at uni, you have assignments and essays and projects that go on for a really long time. And so you do just kind of get used to it. And like you said, Charlie, like, you need to give yourself boundaries and to kind of switch it off and try and keep it as separate as you can. But I feel like if you are a journalist, that's quite hard to do because you're like constantly looking for stuff and talking to people. But it is important to, give yourself boundaries and, try
And
not
also,
dwell on
like,
mistakes.
Like, I do get a buzz out of like chasing breaking news. Like, I love that. So obviously I said, like, I got a bit burnt out with all of that stuff, but generally it doesn't bother me. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
There's the people I work with who don't. They get a buzz out of doing longer, more thought out pieces or doing kind of like happy and finallys, and they would feel miserable if they had to do the hard breaking news stories all the time. So don't feel afraid to say, you know, that's not the area that I'm interested. Obviously it's good to do a bit of everything, but you can say, look, I don't really want to do all the hard stuff. I want to do the and finallys. It's kind of up to you.
I would say my world's a little bit different because I'm on the planning team. So for me, the story doesn't end once the show's gone out. We have to keep that relationship going and moving on with the story. That's a huge thing that we do on Breakfast. So I think the main thing that helps me keep going is my team are fantastic and we really support each other. And we know if someone's getting a bit fatigued, we'll pitch in and help them with the guests, or we'll all just go out for a lunch and just go and have some food and just air out what you need to air out and then go back to it. And I think having your boundaries is definitely a thing. With our team, sometimes the work does come home with you. You've got guests phoning you at 7 o'clock at night and you'll be on the phone with them for an hour. But having a work phone and switching that off and having time with your family is important. But I understand as a journalist, it never really switches off and those pings come through your phone of what's going on the news. But on a weekend, I will not look at my work phone, I will not look at my emails, and I'll start afresh on Monday.
Yeah, I'll just say keeping separation as well is really important because, like, if you're, for me, directing a show, you have to drive it. It's your energy levels. Like, if I'm there in a bad mood and just being grumpy and a bit down and sullen or whatever, that will then affect the presenter who hears me. It'll affect other people working with me. And everyone, you know, we know what it's like. Everyone has bad days. You know, you've got issues in your personal life or whatever. But as soon as I get to work, it's that switch of, right, I now have to take the lead here, drive it, and then afterwards you can deal with whatever is going on. But having that separation so you don't bring, where possible, your issues in your private life to work, because at the end of the day, nobody really wants to hear about it, and the show is the most important thing.
And also, I think, sorry, I can't talk about this forever, but like, honestly, if you came to my office, you would probably think that so much of what's said is really inappropriate. Like, some of the jokes that get made, like, I'm sure, I can't. But you need it. You need to be able to have a laugh with people. And I think otherwise you would just be so burnt out and miserable. Like, the most important thing is to be able to just have a laugh and just realise, like we always say, like, it's just telly. Nobody's died. And it's true. Like, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not the end of the world. It is just a TV programme at the end of the day.
Okay, question up here.
Hi guys, so just a broad question for all of you. As you've all graduated quite recently, still quite young, how have you found it having this sort of level of success at a younger sort of age?
Oh, thanks. Well, I think, you see, we'd all sit here and be like, well, I would sit here and be like, I don't feel like, because I love it. It doesn't feel like that to me. Like, I really like what I do, and I think it's just it's rewarding for me in a way. So I think that's, I just like it, and I knew it was what I wanted to do. So
yeah, I would say I've never done a day's work in my life. Yeah. Genuinely, that, because I knew I wanted to work for Sky Sports for TV, and I'm the same. Like, I love going to work. I don't go another game today. I love going in. And I just take massive satisfaction from that.
Yeah, I agree. I never ever wake up, like, obviously there are days when you think, oh, I can't bother, but I never dread going to work, ever. And I know so many people, so many of my friends that work, like, in kind of different kind of office jobs, whatever, dread going to work and, like, live for the weekends, and I never ever feel like that. And I think in terms of, like, I don't know, I guess if you're sitting here and you've not graduated yet, you might look at us as successful, and I look at you guys as successful. But for myself, I think, because I keep thinking about what I want to do next,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking, wow, I'm look how successful I am. I'm thinking, well, next I want to be a full-time producer, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do that. So I think you just keep,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I absolutely love my job. It doesn't feel like work. But I understand the question. It does feel surreal sometimes.
Yeah.
When you take a step back from it and you think about what you're doing, or you're watching what you've made on live TV, you do feel a bit like, this is my stuff, like, who am I to be doing this?
Yeah.
So you do get some imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But I think you've just got to be confident in who you are, because everyone uniquely has something to bring to the table. And I think that's what you've just got to keep remembering.
Because I think it's right when you say whatever news, whatever programme you're on, people are watching what you've done. Do you know what I mean? That's quite
There's literally nothing like that.
Exactly.
You
Like
can't-
my mates are sat in the pub watching a game that I'm in charge of what they're seeing, and that's quite there is just something unique and surreal about that.
Okay.
Oh, no, me. In an age of social media, independent news sources, and AI, has it become more difficult to verify information so you're not reporting fake news?
I can step out of this.
I think for us, the BBC have a saying that they would rather be second but be right.
Yeah.
So before we would air anything, it gets like triple checked. And especially if it's, legally contentious, it goes through EdPol, it goes through lawyers, it goes through your editor. So we don't rely on AI at all, especially, I don't know at a local level, but at national we don't, and everything gets triple checked, sent to lawyers, sent to EdPol before anything goes out for us.
Even if something is being reported by, say, other newspapers or other media outlets, I mean, I can only speak from the BBC as well, because that's all I've ever known. But yeah, you'd rather leave it out than not be sure about it, because it's a trusted broadcaster, isn't it? And you can't run that risk.
Yeah.
And it's a really credible source. So it's like, you'd rather be second than have it wrong.
What I would say is be careful at what you tweet, though. Even now, just think if you're associated to a company. Because recently, I was telling you guys before, somebody tweeted Piers Morgan from the official Sky Sports account, thinking it was their own personal one, and basically just gave him an absolute volley of abuse with, like, awful words in it. And they realised that, this has gone from the official Sky Sports account to Piers Morgan. And they've deleted it straight away. But obviously all it takes is one person to screenshot it, and that person was quite rightly sacked, because you cannot do that. So just be careful on social media. Just be very careful what you're tweeting. You might think, that it doesn't matter. You're not a celebrity or whatever, but things can always come back to bite you.
Yeah, and I'd say also, like, it's similar to what you guys said. Like, obviously, if you just saw something on Twitter that someone said, you're not just going to report it as fact. But also, different producers have different opinions. So, like, I'm probably slightly less cautious than some other people, because I like to kind of be the first one to get a story. That's not to say that you're just going to put rubbish out there, but I think for us, it's like, if you see something and you think there's something in it, we use social media a lot. It doesn't mean we'll just say what they've said, but we'll use it to gather all the information, and then we'll go out and figure it out for ourselves, or speak to, like, the police or whoever to confirm it. But we wouldn't just kind of ignore something just because it's come from maybe a not credible source. We would still take that, but just back it up.
What I would say as well, though, the NCTJ examples, when they're like, what would you do if this happened, do actually happen in real life. So like, listen to what everybody tells you, because then you will be able to apply it. I don't know if you found that, especially when you're on your own and something happens. But yeah, literally lap up everything you can in terms of that, because they do actually happen.
We have time for one more. Was there one more down the front there? Yeah.
Hi guys. When it comes to applying for TV jobs, what advice can you give to really make yourself stand out as a candidate? Or what do you think about your application and your interviews really made you stand out when it came to applying for the jobs?
I think for me, my whole interview was a laugh. We were literally laughing and joking throughout my interview, and it goes back to what you were saying. You've just got to be authentically you, because these are journalists who are interviewing you, so they can smell a mile off if you're not being yourself and if you're putting a front on. So be authentically you. Think about the idea you're going to pitch, because in whatever interview you're going to do, you're going to have to pitch a story idea. And not only think of it one-dimensional of, this is how I want to do it, you've got to think about multi-platforms, you've got to think about how you're going to do that treatment, whether it's going to be a live, whether it's going to be a ULA sort, or whether it's going to be a package, and think about who you'd have in there, why you would take the angle that you're going to take on that story. What can you bring that's different to, I don't know, say ITV or Sky? What is authentically you, and what can you bring to the table?
I would say, everybody embellishes a little bit, but media is a world where it becomes very clear very quickly if you've lied, because we had somebody start at Sky, and on their CV, they should have been running the company in like 2 months. And as soon as they went into a live gallery, I was like, well, you clearly have never been in a live gallery before. And so they very quickly, they didn't pass their probation. But also on that, so be yourself in an interview, because one thing that's important, if you get an interview, the company already believe that you can do the job. So then it's about selling yourself. So you wouldn't get an interview if they didn't think you could do it. So a lot of people go into interviews and think, oh, I've got to prove that I can do the job. No, they think you have the skill set to do it. It's therefore just about putting your personality across, and that will make you stand out more than something that is on a CV.
I think I'd go... That's really good advice. I'm going to remember that. I'd go back a step, because I think, obviously, I came from radio, and if you want to end up in TV, that's amazing. But that's not always the first step for a lot of people. Like radio, online, like it's not always the first step. And I think don't be afraid to not start in that, because the experience I got in local radio, I would not have my telly job without it. So I think don't be afraid. Yeah, that might be telly's where you want to end up, but maybe don't be afraid to go a few stages to the left, if that makes sense.
I started in radio, and despite everything Darren tried to teach me, I've actually, but I learn all the basics of what I do now, even though it's two different forms of media. The basics of what I now know, I learned in radio.
Yeah, I'd agree. I started in radio as well. And to get into radio, I didn't have a traditional route into it. I didn't apply for a job. I had a conversation at a conference with an editor and was very honest what I thought about the diversity in that programme area. And from that, I got freelancing work. So my other top tip would be, any conversation can be a job interview in this world as well.
And don't be afraid to go for interviews as well that you maybe aren't 100% sure about if you want to do the job. Maybe just go for it for experience, because there is no better experience than an interview. Even if it's something that you might not really want to do, you'll make connections from there, and then who knows what will happen later on in the line. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of us probably don't want to come across arrogant, and this is something I've always struggled with, and I've got a mentor at ITV who speaks to me a lot about the fact that he's like, you need to sell yourself more, but you do. Okay, you might come across a bit of a, not, a bit arrogant, but you need to talk about yourself in an interview how you would talk about your best mate. You need to really talk yourself up, because they're not looking for reasons to think you're amazing. Do you know what I mean? You need to make yourself come across like you're amazing. So don't be afraid to be like, look, I am really good at this, and I am really confident about doing this. And also, I think, for me, I know you all started in radio, but for me, I started in print, online. I think that's the best place to start if you want to go into telly, because it is where everything is moving towards. The whole industry is moving towards digital. So if you can say, I've got a background in digital, that is why I got the job 100%, and it is such a big part of my job now. And So even if either to try and freelance a bit at some like local papers, or even just to be able to say, look, I did the NCCJ and I've got loads of experience at uni, you know, doing social media stuff and online stuff, that they will ask you about that in an interview 100% for news.
Yeah, and producing global television programs always good.
Oh yeah.
I'm presenting.
To be honest,
Catherine.
that was in my in my cover letter and on my CV.
Yeah, same,
When I first
same.
applied for ITV.
You're welcome.
And it's going to be out there forever.
Could you please join me in thanking all these wonderful people?
Wonderful stuff. Okay, guys, so it's lunch.